And hello, everybody. We have now come to that part of the day where we've got a presentation. It's titled The Power of Pilot Projects, Experimental Exhibition Design at the British Museum. And we've got four speakers at the front here. We've got Stuart Frost from the British Museum, Ben Townsend from Journey, Eleanor Greenleaf from Journey, and Sarah Pollard from Ralph Applebaum Associates. So, guys, I'll hand over to you.
Right, great, thank you. Thanks everyone for coming to our session. Hope everyone can hear me clearly. It's a bit odd talking into the microphone, not hearing the volume, so if at any point you can't hear, just wave and we'll pick up the conversation. So yeah, thanks very much for coming to this session, The Power of Pilot Projects. So we've already had a little introduction to the speakers. I'm Stuart Frost, I'm Head of Interpretation. We're basically going to speak for a few minutes each, so about 4 or 5 minutes each about this project. I'm going to start, and then I'm going to pass over to Sarah, Noor, and Ben. And then we're hoping there'll be plenty of time for you to ask us questions at the end. This is basically the structure for our talk. It's, what is a pilot project? Then we're going to look at the first pilot, which is the Vindolanda showcase at the British Museum. Then we're going to look at the second pilot, which is related to the Assyrian galleries, and then we're going to wrap things up. So I'm just going to provide a little bit of background to the British Museum. I've got 3 or 4 minutes, so you have to forgive me for being quick. You can ask me questions later. Basically, 2 types of display at the British Museum: special exhibitions and free permanent galleries. They attract very different audiences, people, different motivations, they behave very differently. So they require different interpretive strategies. In terms of interpretation at the museum, I spent most of my time working on special exhibitions. The permanent galleries at the museum are actually, most of them are quite old, like 25 years plus. They were created before there was an interpretation team. But we've learned a lot from doing special exhibitions, and what we're doing at the moment is experimenting with maybe taking some of the techniques that work successfully in exhibitions and trying to transfer them into the busy permanent galleries, which isn't easy. In terms of pilot projects, we're basically, in British Museum terms, these are small projects which we're doing at high speed. They're experimental, so we're testing different ways of working, we're testing different interpretation strategies, and then we're trying to find out what works and what doesn't so that it can inform future projects. So these 2 pilots are multidisciplinary pilot projects, and the rest of the guys here are going to tell you more about it. I'm just going to talk you very quickly, give you the background to each of the pilots. So you'll have to forgive me here, the picture's very small, you probably can't see it very well. But the one on the left shows an old case in the Roman Britain Gallery. It's about 25 years old, and it got a remarkable collection of objects on display there. They're wooden tablets from the Roman fort at Vindolanda, which I can see some people nodding, so some people have heard of them. They're incredible objects because of the stories that are written on them. So invitations to birthday parties, Roman commanders asking for more beer for their troops because they've run out. Real insight into life in Roman Britain. But you can probably tell they're not very interesting to look at intrinsically. They're small brown bits of wood with indecipherable writing on. And even if you can read Latin, it's pretty hard to read it anyway. So not surprisingly, in this gallery, not many people stop at this case. In fact, we did tracking study, and 100 people just walked past. No one actually stopped and looked at them at all. So this pilot was about how can we bring these objects to life? How can we capture people's attention in a very object-rich museum where there are things that are much more attractive intrinsically, like gold hoards, bronze sculptures, massive mosaics. So that's pilot 1, bringing the Roman Vindolanda tablets to life. Pilot 2 relates to the Assyrian galleries downstairs. Again, these galleries are over 25 years old. The objects are different here, though, because they're intrinsically very, very beautiful. They're incredible sculptures showing various scenes that adorned the palace of the Assyrian kings. But the displays here are very traditional. Most visitors browsing through these galleries, not stopping for very long at any of the individual reliefs, and not necessarily taking away an understanding of how they were arranged, how they were used in the sequence of them. So we're trying here to experiment a little bit with text, graphics, and digital media to capture people's interest, get them to stop for longer, to look a little bit harder, and to take away some really key learning points. And I think at that point, I should probably stop and hand over to Sarah.
I've got a mic. Thanks, Stuart. Can I have the clicker? Right, so why did we choose a multidisciplinary approach?
Sorry, can I go back?
Yes, of course.
Sorry, I forgot one really important point, which I knew I would, if I didn't have my notes with me, I knew I would do it. So the reason we're doing these pilot projects now is that the museum's embarked on a big master plan to completely redisplay the whole museum. So sorry, I forgot the really fundamental important point. This master plan is underway now. The intention is that everything will be complete by 2053. And it's starting in the western range of the museum, which is where the Egyptian sculpture gallery is, where the ancient Assyrian galleries are, where the Greek and Roman collections are. So it's starting there, and then it'll roll out across the museum. So the reason we're doing the pilots now is we want to learn things in a quick and nimble way that can inform that project. Really sorry, Sarah.
That's okay. You need some crib cards, Stuart. Swipe on. So why did we choose a multidisciplinary approach? The team, big multidisciplinary team, we had Ralph Applebaum Associates on the exhibition design, we had Journey on the media design, Michael Grubb Studio for the lighting, Cisco for the AV hardware, and Coda to Coda on the sound. And we chose to work in this multidisciplinary team to explore different methods to enhance the displays in the galleries, and then we could test which were the most successful. And prototyping was a really important part of that process as well, and that decision making. My clicker's not working. No? Oh, well done. Okay, can we go back a couple? Can we go back one more? Thank you. Thanks. Okay. So we established two interpretive modes for the gallery. So Imagine was used to bring the artefacts to life through various theatrical techniques. Do you know this one? Whilst Investigate encouraged visitors to take a closer look, and it would sort of analyse the artefacts in a bit more detail. So the Vindolanda showcase the Vindolanda display thanks, Emma.
Keep going and I'll figure it out for you.
The Vindolanda display, it's thanks, Ben. It's one showcase in the Roman Britain Gallery on the first floor of the British Museum, so it's a very large gallery. Can you go to the next one?
I think you should go there.
Yeah, sure, good idea. Okay, good idea. So it's a very large gallery at the British Museum, and it's just one case within this gallery. This plan shows the location of the gallery. You can approach it from multiple different entrances, and it was just completely lost in this gallery, so people just walked straight past it. As Stuart said, they weren't particularly visually engaging objects, so people would just walk straight past the case. So despite not being particularly attractive objects, the tablets themselves, they carried some really, really powerful messages. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to draw out the voices from in those tablets. So what we decided to do, we've arranged them into 4 categories just to make the messages really clear. So this showcase was, this arrangement of the tablets in the showcase was our Imagine part of the experience. And then on the end of the case, we added a screen, a media screen, which allowed visitors to investigate the tablets in more detail and would look at some of the sort of scientific research around them. we got some large graphic quotes from some of the tablets themselves, and we placed a large sort of eye-catching graphic on the back of the showcase to draw visitors in. And one of those was a lenticular display that would change from the image of the original tablet to the translation in English. So there'd be some movement in the showcase, and that would sort of make visitors stop and would draw attention to it as well.
I'm going to come up.
Yeah.
So, when we... Is that working? Okay. When we look at the role of media in an exhibition, we're not there looking at technology for the sake of technology. We're trying to utilize it to the best it can possibly be. And here, the role of media is how to tell the stories behind these objects. They're incredibly rich objects. They're beautiful and detailed, but people walk past them. There are so many of them. They're hard to understand, and they tell incredibly rich stories. So we do this in two ways. Here we looked at audio. So we had a directional speaker that you can hear the voices of a couple of people reading some of these written letters on the tablets while you look at them in the showcase. So it's a little bit more engaging. It's a little bit more multisensory as well, more accessible. So the voices that we looked at, we think, cover a range of those stories that you might see in the showcase. We have the Roman officer who talks about his commands, his wife who reads a birthday invitation, their assistant who reads a shopping list. They're funny, they're nice stories, and they're more engaging to approach the story like this as well. A little bit more accessible for people getting an in. And then we also look at digital posters. And it's important here because the showcase, the objects in the showcase is around the back, and quite often people miss these. So we look at a series of digital posters on the front of the showcase that really draws people in, and it gives you contextual information to understand what those stories are and what those objects are, and the research behind them before you go around and see the objects proper. And we looked at a series of themed stories to try and attract different audiences that are at the museum. The more technical, historical, archaeological side, the more social lives of the real people who lived there, and the more research that the British Museum are doing with those tablets to uncover mysteries about them, how they were written, the materials that were used. They're short format. They're really, really short, 30-second to 1 minute long reels. And this is for the different types of audiences. It's to attract people's attention as they're walking by. Next generation of audiences accept really short TikTok-style information. But they're also short so you can grab those stories. They're bite-size. And the posters work as a hook to redirect people's attention. There's a little ident that goes between some of those posters that says, walk around to find out more. And then we think that flexibility is really important here. It's a pilot project. We're learning from the audiences and how people are engaging with these stories. We're analysing them, so if some stories work and some stories don't, we can edit them out. When more discoveries are made, we can add them in. If the object's completely changed in the showcase, we have a templated system and we can tell different stories as needed. Back to you.
So the Assyrian galleries on the ground floor at the British Museum, they can be approached from 3 different entrances. So circulation was quite complicated. So we decided to make the Khorsabad threshold the primary entrance, and we created this primary circulation route which took visitors in through the siege of Lachish and then into the Lion Hunt galleries. And then through another couple of entrances in the Nimrud galleries, we took visitors on a secondary circulation route through the King's Throne Room. And this image shows the throne room before we started work. It's quite interesting. It's 40-metre long frieze in this gallery. Originally, there was a panel that ran through the middle called the standard inscription. And the standard inscription was a repeated cuneiform text which talked about the king's military victories, but the archaeologists never brought it back to the British Museum in the first place. So it was always, the display was always, as you can see here, with this gap running through the middle. And the interpretation involved a series of small labels along the rail at low level. It was quite difficult relating the label to what you were looking at on the wall. So one of the things we thought was really important was to bring the king back into his throne room. So what we did here was we created a graphic. We traced the illustration from one of the friezes of the king, and we produced it in as a translucent panel in etched glass, which was edge lit. So it was really, visually quite engaging in the gallery. And we reintroduced a very few labels that talked about some very specific parts of the frieze, so some of the details. And the key intervention we made here was reinstating the standard inscription. So we created a graphic that ran right the way through the middle of the frieze, where the standard inscription was originally, with a number of arrows and captions that identified key moments in the frieze as you walk along. And then you can see the text highlighted in white are translations of that cuneiform text, and we did that in a number of languages to speak to our international audience. This is an image showing the finished thing with the king in place in the throne room, and that standard inscription now reinstated running through the middle of the frieze, and the rail at the bottom, we've taken all of the labels off the rail at the bottom, so all of the interpretation is at eye level, right in the middle of the frieze that it's interpreting. Then moving into the Siege of Lachish gallery, we were really struck with the friezes in this gallery and how they're designed a bit like a film storyboard or a graphic novel, and they actually play out the events in illustrations as you walk around the room. So we took that idea of the sort of graphic novel, and we decided it'd be really great to add some sort of graphic techniques with some sort of dynamic illustrations to really bring some of the action to life that's depicted in the friezes. So we created these small plinths that you can see in this image on the right, which are almost like a book. So the idea, we took that graphic novel idea, and we use these to help visitors imagine the friezes with our Imagine mode, and then we had some lift flaps within those that visitors would physically interact with to delve a bit deeper and investigate in the Investigate mode that we'd created. And then also in this gallery there was this little showcase tucked in a corner of the room that had a few artefacts that were recovered from the Lachish battle site. There were some arrowheads and missiles, but visitors never really made the connection between the objects in the case and the scenes that were depicted in the frieze on the wall. So what we did here was we took a section of that frieze and we reproduced it as a graphic in the back of the case, and we overlaid the arrowheads and the missiles onto the image, and immediately people could see the connection between the objects they were looking at and the scenes that were depicted in the friezes on the walls.
It's me. Thanks, Sarah. Hi, I'm Ben Townsend from Journey, and I'm going to talk you through a bit of the media for the Lion Hunt. The media and the digital is a super powerful tool, and it covers a huge gamut of what we can do with media and projection mapping and screens and AI and all this big conversation. But the first thing that I'm thinking about when I go into a gallery is what is right for this project, for this audience, for this exhibit or this collection, and what the team is trying to do. So I think about what is the role of media and how can that help and support the vision that the British Museum and the team have. When I first saw The Lion Hunt, it took me a while to really get it, to understand it, and then the team talked me through the story behind it, and it really is incredible. I realized it was a storyboard that was laid out, and as a filmmaker that really resonated with me deeply, and I thought, wow, what an incredible storyboard. The problem is, it's not laid out chronologically, and it's not animated. So I thought the role of media in this instance is how do we bring it to life, and how do we tell that story in a sequence? So how can we combine digital and physical to choreograph this storyboard, to tell the story of the lion hunt in a sequence? And there's a couple of tricks and tools that we had at our disposal to do that. The first is lighting, or the abundance of lighting. That at the moment, everything, the light was on and you could see all of the scenes within the lion hunt at once. So we thought if we turned all the lights off and then just put a spotlight on the area of the lion hunt that we want to see first. But how do we give our audiences a little bit more? How do we tell a bit more of a story? Well, the next layer that we bring in incrementally is sound. And that's in 3 layers. We have the background sound for the gallery that gives us an overall environment sound, a mid-ground sound that will give us a bit more detail about that area of the lion hunt, and then my favorite, the foreground sounds, all the details, the Foley and effects of what you're seeing. It's the sound of an archer pulling the bow back, the arrow flying through the air, and that roar of a lion as it gets hit by an arrow. And synchronizing that with the lighting, it tells a bit of a story, and it sparks the imagination of our audiences. And then we get to the heroic moment of the king himself, and this is a really complex scene to unpick. There's a lot going on in this one shot. So we used animation to deconstruct that. If we look around this image and see what's going on, we can bring that animation in bit by bit. We hear the thunder of the horse, the crack of the whip as the chariot driver spurs the chariot on. We hear the lion jumping onto the back of the chariot, and finally the king striking the lion with his spear. That's the heroic moment. That's what the whole story is building up to, is this powerful king destroying the lion. As a pilot project, what did we discover? We've got layers of media, what's working and what's not working. And the thing that I took away from this, I thought was really interesting, is there is a generational divide between a more purist, traditional audience that don't really see a place for media in this type of experience, and the next-gen audience who expect media in these experiences, that they've grown up with media and they want to see it and they're familiar with it. And that was really interesting to me. And I think my big takeaway for that is that a pilot project will help the broader team establish what the role is of media in their particular museum, that each of your museums has an independent signature or digital signature that relates to your audience, your collection, and what their expectations are. And a pilot project is really great for finding that out and getting some feedback from that. I'm going to hand over to Stuart, who's going to talk about some lessons learned.
Well, I'm going to wrap up quite quickly so that we've got time for questions, but obviously a really crucial part of a pilot project is the evaluation. So the evaluation is in progress. So for the Assyrian galleries, we've done a lot of tracking and observation. We've done interviews with people in the space, and we've been inviting people through temporary signage to send in feedback about it. So as Ben says, it's been a little bit divisive. The vast majority of people have been sending back really, really positive feedback. But there are some people who feel it's not appropriate. These are beautiful objects in release, and they don't need the digital media help. But overall, very positive. And not surprisingly, in the Assyria galleries, the animation, the lion hunt sequence is the thing that attracts the most interest. In fact, sometimes it's a little bit too popular because it creates a bottleneck in the gallery, and other people moving through the spaces turn around and go back because they can't get through. So we're inserting something into galleries that weren't designed to accommodate it as part of the learning, really. Well, I've got a couple of quotes which I'll just read to show that I'm not making this up. So one visitor sent quite a long, thoughtful email, but I think it should be in a separate room that lets the experience be immersive without getting in the way of the actual artifacts. the reliefs are already spectacular. They don't need these bells and whistles to help. That's a minority view. The vast majority of people, it's been really, really positive. So, for example, the Assyrian section ended up being my favorite in the museum. I thought the video overlay with the lion hunt was a great addition. Walking through the entrance with the statues on either side made you feel like you were going into the real room and really added to the experience. I got more out of the story behind the reliefs than anywhere else. And for this one, it's the first bit of digital media that I've worked on or with in the museum where there's been a spontaneous round of applause. So I've been going in there watching people. Once they realise the sequence has started, they stay all the way through, filming it on their phones, and then at the end, when I was in there, they didn't know I was in there. There's a little round of applause to the team and everyone who worked on it. And obviously, a lot of people were involved in this, like more than here, like curatorial colleagues at the museum and so on. In terms of Interlander, evaluation is really just getting underway on that case, but it's clear already from observation that it's making a big difference because it wasn't really attracting interest before, and it is now. So I'll stop there, then hopefully we've got time for questions.
We've got a nice big audience, so I am hoping we've got some questions from the floor. Oh, right at the front. I will head over. There you go.
Thanks, very impressive. Two questions really. One, you mentioned in the terms of British Museum, these were very short and small projects. How long were they really? And the second one, evaluation. In your evaluation brief, did you set clear objectives and outcomes you wanted to get from these projects?
Thanks. So yeah, in terms of timeline, I guess there's museum time and there's British Museum time, and the British Museum is not known for its nimbleness. So by British Museum standards, this was a really nimble project. So I would say 6 months is a rough indication of the sort of speed that it was done at. I think some aspects of that were challenging from my side, but I think it's quick projects. And in terms of the evaluation, then absolutely identifying sort of key areas to explore, key research questions. But I can share that with you. If we don't get to answer everyone's question and people want to know more, if you contact us, I can share things with people.
Thank you. Anyone else with a question? Okay, I'm going to ask you one. You talked about it being quite a large group of people that were collaborating together. What were the challenges of that collaboration? But I'm guessing there was some magic alongside it. So balance the two out. What were the challenges of that collaboration, and what was the magic that came from it?
Yeah, interesting question. We did a lot of testing on site with the lighting designers, with Cisco, and we brought a lot of programmable lighting onto the site, and we did some big graphic printouts, and we brought a lot of the audio onto the site as well. So, whenever we did that testing, everybody was there. It wasn't just a couple from the client team. The room was about, there were about 30 people there, with the lighting designers, the hardware consultants, Journey, the curators, everybody was there. And it was it was really, really helpful process actually. And it helped us sort of weed out the ideas that we thought weren't going to be that successful, and then decide which ones we wanted to pursue and move ahead with.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to do one more at the back of the room, and then we'll...
Hiya. I had a question about how front of house or visitor experience... Can you hear me now? Oh, louder. How visitor experience or front of house staff were involved in it insofar as it's responding to visitor behavior and patterns and engagement.
Did you get that, guys?
Yeah, so it's about involvement of the front of house team and so on. Yeah, absolutely crucial. So definitely in terms of getting feedback about how things are running, it's a really important part of the evaluation process. I think, and there obviously was consultation with the front of house team about what was being proposed and how that was going to work in those galleries, because they are narrow corridor-like galleries, and we wanted to get their input. They spend a lot of time in the galleries and know what the flow's like and what's going to work and what's not. So as a concrete example, one of the things that we discussed and agreed with them was the length of the sequence of the show for the Lion Hunt relief, because it runs and then there's a period of downtime, so people can look at the reliefs without the projections or the lighting happening. And, the light goes back up, people can see them. And there was a question about how long should it be down for. And I think some people wanted it, like within the project team, wanted it to run more often, and other people wanted it to be, have a longer downtime. So for people who want a quieter experience, they could have that. So that's something that was agreed with, in consultation with the front of house team. And then we were obviously asking them for feedback about what's working and so on, and to capture all of that learning. Because as part of a pilot, these things work in special exhibitions, but how do you make it work in a permanent gallery, which is a very different context, and their feedback's key on that.
That's wonderful. Guys, that was a really interesting presentation. Thank you ever so much. Thank you, Stuart, Ben, Eleanor and Sarah. A quick round of applause.